"You're at the wrong table," she said, not even hiding the smirk. "This one's reserved for people who belong here." Her eyes dragged over his boots, the soft fray at his collar, the wristwatch that hadn't ticked in a year. Laughter from the next table echoed her sentiment, louder than necessary, just sharp enough to slice. But the man didn't flinch. He simply pulled out the chair across from her, sat down, and folded his hands like a man preparing for war without weapons. "By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. Because this isn't just a story about a blind date gone wrong. It's about what happens when the man they humiliate turns out to be the one holding the floor they're all standing on." He didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't retaliate. He looked her dead in the eye and said, "I paid for this table." The moment passed like a cough in a cathedral, quiet, awkward, and unacknowledged. Sable glanced away, feigning interest in the wine list, but her fingers curled tighter around the stem. No one ever spoke like that to her, not without groveling right after. She'd seen men try to bluff status before. This one looked like he'd arrived from a shift in a boiler room, not a gala rooftop in Midtown. And yet, there was no mockery in his voice, no neediness, just a quiet steadiness that made her hate how unsure she suddenly felt. He didn't say another word, just watched the skyline through the glass like it was more interesting than her. She couldn't have known, none of them could have, that the man in thrift store boots had once overseen black-budget assets larger than her entire fund portfolio, that he'd written checks under code names, that he'd built empires no one would ever trace back to him. But he wasn't here for recognition. He was here for something, someone else. She didn't know that either. He'd left his daughter at home tonight, tucked beneath a quilt, embroidered with hospital ward cartoons and oxygen silence. 7 years old and fighting for breath most nights. Born with a heart so fragile, it was a miracle every time she laughed without pain. The only reason she had made it this far was because of this gala's charity, and because he had kept giving, even after his name disappeared from the world's rosters. He kept his promises. That's what he'd always done. So when they laughed at him, when she tossed her little barbs across the white linen tablecloth, he didn't rise. He remembered the first oxygen mask, the surgeon's downcast eyes, the 27 nights without sleep, the job that came after, all silent elevators and chemical leaks, hands raw from pipework, scraping through grit so Lena could live. That's why he sat still. He didn't care what she thought. He only cared that the foundation's funding goal was met. And if that meant letting one more person underestimate him, so be it. They weren't the first. They wouldn't be the last. He watched the host move toward the stage. Time for the auction. Time for the part no one expected. Time to remind them all. Sometimes the man in boots doesn't just belong at the table. Sometimes he built it. The microphone clicked, and the host's voice rang out over the clink of cutlery and curated string music. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the live auction, a quick moment of gratitude." Corin didn't move. He knew what came next. He'd asked the host to keep it anonymous, but Kai had refused. Said there were times the truth needed to land like thunder, not whisper like fog. Sable didn't seem to hear the announcement. She was busy swirling her wine, pretending to enjoy the Pinot Noir someone else picked for her. Her bracelet, thin, gold, impossibly expensive, caught the stage light. A flex, an unearned one. Kai continued, "One of tonight's tables, our platinum tier dinner experience, was paid in full weeks ago. Quietly, no demand for recognition, no press release, just one line on a wire transfer that read, "For the ones fighting in silence." The crowd paused, forks lowered, heads turned. Corin watched her freeze, just slightly. A blink too long, a breath held. He'd seen that kind of breath before, in briefings, in boardrooms, and once in a war zone when a drone operator realized they'd targeted the wrong compound. It was the inhale before reckoning. Sable set down her wine. Kai smiled gently, scanning the room. And as of tonight, that same donor has covered 8 full pediatric cardiac surgeries in honor of his daughter. We'll honor his name now, with his permission, Mr. Corin Delmer. Half the room turned toward him. The other half had already been watching. Corin didn't stand. He nodded once. The applause came in waves, first polite, then rising, then tinged with something else. Respect, shock, maybe the weight of guilt for those who judged too quickly. Sable turned, back to him, her voice suddenly thin. "That was you?" He met her eyes. "Guess I do belong at this table." She said nothing. He didn't need her to. By the way, subscribe if you've ever been underestimated, because what happens next makes her regret every single word. Sable turned away again, this time with something quieter than shame, maybe reflection, maybe calculation, but he wasn't watching her anymore. He was looking at the auctioneer. He remembered the first year this event almost shut down, right after Lena's 3rd surgery. Budgets cut, sponsors withdrawn. He'd made a choice then. Quiet money, no spotlight, keep it alive for other kids like her. He never planned to attend one of these galas. Tonight was only for Lena's sake. She'd begged him to go. "You look handsome in a tie," she said. He hadn't worn one, but he'd come. Sable cleared her throat. "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" He gave a half smile. "Didn't see the point. No offense, but you don't exactly look like someone who donates $500,000 to children's surgery." "No offense taken," he said. He let the silence sit there, thick as syrup. She shifted uncomfortably. "Look," she started again, softer this time. "I was out of line." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Sable wasn't used to silence being the final word. She leaned forward. "So what do you do now?" "Maintenance." Her eyes twitched. "Like elevators and stuff?" "Sometimes." Another pause. She tried again. "But you used to." "Used to doesn't feed my daughter." That shut it down. She picked up her fork, suddenly very interested in the basil drizzle on her plate. But it was too late. The power imbalance had flipped, and she felt it. Corin looked across the gala, not at the tables or the chandeliers, at the kids laughing near the mocktail bar, at the nurse he recognized from Lena's ward, at the whiteboard announcing tonight's fundraising goal, $1 million. They were close. He stood, walked to the donation station, and pulled out a worn checkbook. Yes, checkbook, and added another $20,000. Just enough to tip the total over the mark. No announcement this time, but the volunteer at the station blinked twice and whispered, "Sir, thank you." He nodded, turned, and walked back to his table. He didn't sit. Sable looked up at him like she didn't know whether to stand, speak, or disappear. "Tell your friends," he said, quiet enough for just her to hear. "Next time they mock a man's boots, they might want to check if the floor's still there when they're done." Then he walked away. The corridor beyond the ballroom smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and old money. Corin's boots echoed once, twice, then faded as the door swung shut behind him. He didn't rush. He never did. Rushing made mistakes louder. Sable stayed at the table, staring at the empty chair like it had accused her. The applause still rang in her ears, warped now, like it belonged to another room. She pushed back her seat and stood, smoothing her dress, then hesitated. People watched. They always did. Kai met Corin near the service hallway, a narrow passage meant for staff carts and discreet exits. "You okay?" the host asked, voice low. He nodded. "That was more than we agreed." Kai shrugged. It needed daylight. Corin glanced toward the ballroom doors. "She'll be fine." "You sure?" He smiled, tired but steady. "She's used to winning." Back inside, Sable took a breath and lifted her chin. She crossed the room with the kind of practiced confidence that usually parted crowds. Tonight, it didn't. People didn't move. They looked. Some smiled. Others whispered. A woman in pearls nodded with something like approval. A man with a venture badge frowned. "Ms. Kinter," someone said. "Did you know him?" She stopped. "I do now." At the bar, she ordered, "Water. No wine." The glass felt cold and grounding. She replayed the night in reverse, the jokes she'd made, the assumptions she'd stacked like chips. Each one toppled. Across the room, Corin leaned against a column, hands in pockets, watching the auctioneer work the crowd. Numbers climbed, paddles rose. He felt a familiar pull behind his ribs, the old instinct to optimize, to nudge variables until outcomes bent. He resisted. This wasn't his arena anymore. He'd done his part. A volunteer approached, young, nervous. "Sir, thank you again. The goal's been exceeded." "Good," he said. "Make sure the overflow goes to aftercare." "Yes, sir." He flinched at the word, then let it go. Sable found him by the column. She stopped a step away, leaving space like a truce. "I wanted to say—" He held up a hand. "Not necessary." "It is," she insisted. "I was wrong. About you. About— a lot." He studied her face. The edge was gone, replaced by something rawer. "Apologies are actions," he said. "Words are fine too, but actions stick." She nodded. "What would you have me do?" He thought of Lena's quiet courage, the way she counted breaths during pain. "Use your reach," he said, "without branding it." "That's it?" "That's everything." She swallowed. "I can do that." A murmur rose from the stage as Kai announced the final tally. Cameras flashed. The number settled. Cheers followed. Sable clapped with the rest, slower now, intentional. "Walk with me," Corin said. They moved toward the balcony doors, the city humming beyond the glass. Cool air hit his face. He breathed easier out here. "I don't usually get blindsided," she said. "Everyone does," he replied. "Once." She looked at his boots. "They're scuffed." "They work." Silence stretched, comfortable this time. "You could have crushed me," she said finally. Publicly. "I didn't come to crush anyone. Why come at all?" He pictured a small room, monitors beeping, a child's hand warm in his. "Because sometimes you show up so other people can keep showing up." Inside, the gala wound down. Staff cleared plates. Music softened. A few guests drifted toward exits, glancing back at the man on the balcony like they were memorizing a lesson. Sable turned to him. "Will you come next year?" "Maybe," he said. "Depends on the floor." She smiled, the real kind. "I'll make sure it's solid." He nodded once, then headed for the service stairs. The night swallowed his footsteps, leaving the echo behind, steady and earned. On the way down, he passed a maintenance closet with a broken latch, the smell of oil and metal familiar. He fixed it without thinking, a twist of wire, a press, the click returning. It felt right to leave places better than he found them. Outside, rain began, light at first, stippling the pavement. He didn't open his coat. He liked the cold. It kept him honest. Across the glass, Sable watched him disappear and felt the urge to chase applause fade. She took out her phone, drafted a note to her partners, then deleted the flourish. Simple words remained. Commitments. Dates. No press. Kai joined her at the balcony rail. "He won't take credit," the host said. "I know," she replied. "I think that's the point." Below, the city breathed. Sirens dopplered, taxis hissed, lives intersected. Corin stepped into it, anonymous again, and felt the weight lift. He'd pack a lunch. Tonight, he'd call Lena and listen to her sleep. Somewhere behind him, the gala lights dimmed. Ahead, the street waited, a promise kept quietly. Rain slicked the curb as Corin crossed the street, collar turned up, breath steady. He didn't hurry. The city rewarded patience. He called Lena before the light changed, listened to the soft hush of her breathing, the sleepy hello that steadied everything. "I'm fine," she said, and he believed her because belief was a tool, too. Morning came with the rattle of the boiler room. He signed in, took the cart, checked the list. Leaks, flicker, a jammed freight door. Work kept the mind honest. A supervisor mentioned the gala in passing, a headline on a phone, then shrugged. Corin nodded and tightened a valve. Exposure didn't need applause to do its work. It only needed time. Across town, Sable woke to messages stacked like coins. Partners asked questions without punctuation. A donor requested a meeting. Someone forwarded a clip, cropped and quiet, of the announcement. She watched it once, then again, hearing the room change. She drafted a reply and erased adjectives until only commitments remained. No logo, no press. At noon, a courier arrived at the foundation with a folder bearing no brand. Inside were pledges, structured carefully, patient money. Kai smiled when he saw the terms. Aftercare funded, transportation covered, no naming rights. He sent a thank you that said little and meant much. Back at the building, Corin fixed the freight door. He felt the weight of eyes and ignored it. A junior tech asked how he'd learned to diagnose without guessing. "Measure twice," he said. "Listen once." The kid nodded, hungry. Seeds travel quietly. Sable visited the hospital after work. She didn't call ahead. The ward smelled like antiseptic and crayons. A nurse recognized her name and blinked. Sable asked where help was thin and stayed long enough to learn it wasn't glamorous. She left a note at the desk with a number and no title. That evening, rain returned, harder. Corin took the stairs to his apartment, fixed a loose rail on the way, then cooked. Lena ate slowly, proud of finishing. He told her about the auction without names, framed as math. "Did it work?" she asked. "It did," he said. She smiled and fell asleep mid-sentence. News drifted. A column mentioned anonymous donors changing norms. A forum argued about boots and bias. None of it reached him until a neighbor knocked, embarrassed, asking for help with a breaker. Corin went, tools in hand. The lights came back. Gratitude settled where noise had been. Sable sat in her office late, city blinking. She reviewed portfolios with a new lens, cutting flash, adding patience. She remembered his words about floors and checked foundations. One investment paused. Another pivoted toward care. Quiet changes, durable ones. Weeks passed. The foundation posted outcomes, not faces. 8 children scheduled, aftercare staffed. Corin watched numbers like weather, satisfied when patterns held. He stayed maintenance because it fit the promise he'd made. Keep life simple. Keep people breathing. At a site inspection, a city official shook his hand too firmly. "Heard about you," the man said. Corin smiled without confirming. Reputation leaks when pressure finds seams. On a clear night, he and Lena counted stars from the window. "People can be mean," she said, remembering. "Sometimes," he agreed, "but they can learn." Below, the street hummed, steady. Above, the sky kept its distance. Between them, work continued, and the table held. The following Monday, a meeting invite appeared on Sable's calendar without urgency marks. She accepted and arrived early, choosing the smaller room. When partners pressed for leverage, she talked timelines, not dominance, and insisted on patient capital. The tone shifted. Someone scoffed. She let it pass. Influence, she realized, worked better when it felt inevitable rather than loud. Notes were taken, assumptions loosened, and a vote delayed, quietly aligning money with care for once without posturing or applause afterward there. At home, Corin reorganized the toolbox, replacing a cracked handle and labeling drawers. Order soothed him. He drafted a budget, penciled a trip to the park, and circled a clinic date. When the phone rang, he answered without greeting, listened, then thanked the caller. For thinking of the children, he declined the meeting, suggested a donation, and hung up lighter. Promises mattered most when kept small and daily, invisible to crowds, yet sturdy enough to hold families everywhere like his. The city adjusted. Elevators ran smoother. A grant announcement landed without fanfare. Sable sent a single-line update to Kai, then closed the laptop. Corin walked Lena to school beneath a clean sky, felt the future loosen its grip. Somewhere, the gala's lesson kept working, slow and certain, proving that exposure didn't burn. It illuminated. It changed rooms, habits, and decisions until humility became profitable and dignity the quiet standard for those paying attention long after applause faded from memory and headlines. Morning light found the stairwell clean and quiet, the lesson still working its way through the city. Corin unlocked the service door and rolled his card out, the wheels humming like approval. He checked the clipboard, nodded once, and moved. Pipes breathed, lights answered, and the building kept faith. A clink stopped him. Something small had fallen from his pocket near the elevator pit, a rectangle scuffed smooth by years of worry. He crouched, picked it up, and brushed grit away. Lena's photo smiled back, edges soft, corners taped. The old hospital wristband was tucked behind it, ink faded, but legible. Voices drifted from the lobby. A woman in pearls paused, staring. "Is that pediatric?" she asked, gentle now. He straightened, thumb covering the band. "It's hers," he said. The questioner nodded, eyes damp, and told another, quieter than before. Word traveled the way it always does, by kindness, noticing detail. If you've ever had someone judge you by the surface, stick around and subscribe, because this story delivers what silence builds and noise misses. The supervisor appeared, then a nurse from the foundation who'd come to check accessibility. She noticed the photo, the band, the tape. "My son had that unit," she said softly. He listened, asked after outcomes, named medications without show. Her brows lifted. A look passed, respectful and curious. Across town, Sable sat in a small conference room, phone face down. She read a report on aftercare gaps and thought of the taped corners. She approved transport funding and cut a flashy sponsorship. The decision felt heavier, better. She sent a note to Kai. Numbers attached, no headline. Back by the elevators, the building shuddered and stilled, a brief power dip. He moved without thinking, wristband pressed into his palm like a talisman. He reset a breaker, timed the restart, listened for strain. The nurse watched him work, precise and calm. She asked where he learned it. "Listening," he said, smiling. She laughed, relieved. "You sound like my best attending," he shrugged. The object did the talking now, small and undeniable, anchoring a truth no resume could. By afternoon, a facilities memo circulated about emergency readiness. It cited an unnamed tech. Corin read it, folded it, and taped it inside the toolbox lid beside the photo. The pairing felt right. Care and craft sharing space. Sable visited the ward again at dusk. She didn't bring cameras. She brought socks, puzzles, time. A parent mentioned a maintenance guy who fixed a latch and asked about meds. Sable smiled, understanding how symbols travel faster than names. Night settled. Corin walked Lena home from the park, toolbox light in his stride. She held the photo and the band, asked if they were lucky. "They're reminders," he said, "of who we work for." She squeezed his hand. The city kept adjusting, quietly. In a service corridor meant for labor, a small object had spoken. Exposure didn't roar, it accumulated. By morning, decisions would bend again, guided by a picture, a band, and a man who listened. At work, a fire drill sounded, sharp and metallic. People hesitated. He guided flow with gestures, voice low, counting exits, calming a child who froze. The wristband peeked from his pocket again, grounding him. The building emptied cleanly. Applause stayed inside throats. A city inspector later asked questions. He answered simply, never naming credentials. The inspector nodded, scribbled, and left recommendations that favored training over blame. Somewhere, policy shifted a notch. That was the real win. Systems learning from quiet proof. Sable reviewed the fire report that night. She recognized the pattern. Competence revealed by restraint. She approved a pilot program for emergency readiness across her portfolio buildings. Anonymous funding. Open source playbooks. It felt like repaying a debt she hadn't known she owed. At dinner, Lena lined up peas and asked about helpers. He told her about nurses, techs, donors who stayed quiet. She added the band to her keepsake box and closed it carefully. "We're rich," she said, serious. He laughed, then nodded, because she was right. The DE Foundation emailed outcomes the next morning. Corin forwarded it to no one. He fixed a leaky valve, drank bad coffee, and felt content. The symbolic object had done its work, turning glances into choices. The strategy advanced without speeches, exactly as intended. Even Sable noticed the change at her next event. Jokes softened. Boots were just boots. She smiled once, privately, thinking of tape and ink. Exposure, she understood now, wasn't a spotlight. It was a mirror passed hand to hand, reflecting care until rooms learned to hold it. Outside, Corin locked the shop, keys warm in his palm. He glanced up, steady. Tomorrow would ask again. He'd answer the same way, quietly, with tools, and with love, for his daughter and those needing floors to stand on there. The toolbox clicked shut, sealing order beneath its dented lid. Corin stood for a moment longer, hand resting on the top, as if closing it completed something more than just another shift. Outside, the early sky held the blue-gray tint of storms deciding whether to stay or go. He looked at the photo taped inside. Lena, post-op, 2 teeth missing, grin wider than the bandages. The wristband sat just below it, the loop flattened by time. It didn't need to say anything. Its ink had already done enough work for one lifetime. By mid-morning, he was fixing a rooftop exhaust fan. It was loud, temperamental, and unbalanced. Just enough to remind him of the executives who used to argue over kill ratios and suits they never sweat through. He adjusted the mounting, then paused as voices floated up through the stairwell. "I heard he used to be military." "No, finance, some classified operation." "Whatever it was, did you see how the inspector deferred to him? Guy's a ghost in boots." He didn't react. Rumors were oxygen now, feeding through the system. He let them spread. Victory didn't require volume. It required momentum, and momentum was building. Downstairs, a tenant lobby meeting was underway, and Sable was unexpectedly present, not as a guest, but as a listener. She wore no brand tags today, no statement heels. She'd requested a tour of every property she funded, and insisted on meeting the maintenance team at each stop. "Who's the one they're all whispering about?" she asked a tenant coordinator, casually. The woman glanced toward the freight stairwell. "The one who makes everything work when no one's watching." Sable smiled faintly. "That sounds right." Corin came down later to fix a stubborn lobby thermostat. As he crouched near the base panel, she entered. He didn't look up. "You said apologies were actions," she said. "I did." "I'm listening now," she said. "And learning." He straightened, tools still in hand. "Then we're square." She hesitated. "The board wants to name the pediatric wing after me. I told them no." He looked at her for the first time. "That's an action." "And I told them about you. That's a risk. They're already Googling. Good luck finding anything that matters." The corners of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I'll make sure they never do it in your name, just in your model." He nodded once. "Better use of the concrete." Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the thermostat clicked, fixed. Sable watched him pack his tools with deliberate care. "People think I'm powerful," she said, "but I've never made a building breathe again." He shrugged. "I've never moved $1 million with one email." "You moved more than that with one photo." His hand paused over the latch. She'd seen it then, the taped photo, the worn band. He didn't ask how. He didn't need to. Later that week, a young tech came to shadow him, wide-eyed and eager. Corin didn't say much, just showed him how systems talked if you listened hard enough. When the kid asked why his toolbox had a photo inside, Corin replied, "So I don't forget who I answer to." Sable, on another floor, passed a new sign by the stairwell. Emergency readiness upgraded by team. No names, just acknowledgement. Back at home, Lena traced her wrist with a marker. "It used to be right here," she said. "Like magic tape." He nodded. "It still is." She asked him to teach her how to fix something. He chose the squeaky cabinet, handed her a screwdriver, and told her to listen. When the sound disappeared, her smile returned. That night, as rain returned to tap the window, Corin received a message from Kai. The board asked again. "I told them the same thing. Some men don't wear names on their backs. They carry people instead." He replied simply, "Keep them carried." Across the city, elevators ran smoother. Fire drills cleared faster. Conversations got quieter and deeper. Exposure had done its job. Now poetic justice took root, not in headlines, but in policies, habits, and minds recalibrated toward dignity. In the same lobby where he was once mocked, a child waited for her father, holding a paper bracelet she'd made in class. It read, "Hope Builder." The security guard nodded toward Corin as he walked by. "That her dad?" "Yeah, someone said. That's the one. Corin held the stairwell door open with his boot as the little girl darted past him, her paper bracelet flapping at her wrist. She grinned up at him, missing front teeth, hair in braids, laughter unguarded. It says, "Hope Builder," she declared, twisting her arm so he could see. "Ms. Faulkner said we had to make one for someone real." He looked at it. Lopsided letters, too much glitter. Perfect. "You did good," he said softly. Behind her, the girl's father, maintenance from another property, nodded, eyes shining more than he wanted to admit. "She's been asking to meet you," the man said. "Ever since the story about the gala made it into the staff briefing." Corin exhaled slowly. "I didn't think they'd publish anything." "They didn't, but people talk." The man shifted. "Some of us, we needed someone to look up to too." Corin didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just gave a quiet nod and turned toward the boiler intake. Invisibility had been armor once, but lately it was wearing thin, not in a bad way, just in a way that made him easier to see. Upstairs, Sable stood at the head of a foundation board meeting. Gone were the LED screens and projection decks. Instead, she handed out single sheets of paper, handwritten notes, funding impact diagrams, a list of field workers who'd made the recent changes possible. "There's one more name," she said. "But he won't let me write it down." A pause, a challenge. "So instead, we're adopting his method. No titles, no plaques, just results." In the back row, Kai leaned forward, smiling. One of the older trustees raised an eyebrow. "And what method is that?" Sable answered calmly. "It's called showing up." Back at the service dock, Corin was showing up again. An elderly tenant was stuck in the freight lift with groceries and a frightened dog. When the backup team hesitated, Corin bypassed the panel with a grounding wire and calm hands. The door creaked open to relief and barking. No one clapped. They just thanked him the way people thank gravity. Later, the building manager pulled him aside. "You know, word is someone submitted your name to the city's integrity honors." Corin blinked. "Why?" "Because this building hasn't failed once in 6 months." "That's just doing the job." "Exactly." Corin said nothing more. He'd never liked trophies. But as he walked back to the shop, he passed a bulletin board where someone had pinned a note. "If you see Corin, thank him. Your elevators move because he does." He removed it quietly. Downstairs, his apprentice, the young tech from before, was waiting with questions. They walked the EZU circuit together. Voltage readings, drain noise, sensor lag. The kid soaked it up, eager and sharp. Midway through, the kid asked, "Why don't you run the department?" Corin paused. "Because running things means meetings, and I'm not done fixing yet." "Still, if more people knew who you were, that's the problem," Corin cut in gently. "Too many people want to be known before they've done the knowing." The kid frowned, thinking it through, then nodded. Lesson received. Elsewhere, Sable toured a mid-renovation property with foundation partners. The site supervisor pointed to a man on the scaffolding. "New hire, former vet, said he took the job because he heard about the guy with the toolbox and the daughter." She smiled, quiet and proud. The movement was working. Not as a brand, but as a benchmark. At home that night, Lena handed her father a folded piece of paper. "It's for school," she said. "We had to draw who makes the world safer." He opened it. It was a picture of him on a ladder, holding a giant heart with little stars around it. She'd drawn his boots too, one scuffed, one perfect. He cleared his throat. That's pretty accurate, she grinned. I told Ms. Bell you were a heart fixer. He tucked the drawing into his toolbox behind the photo and the wristband. No metal had ever felt heavier. Later, Kai called. Quick heads up, he said. The gala team's doing a 10-year montage. They're asking if they can include footage from your table. Corin sighed. Didn't we settle this? I know, I said no, but I also told them you'd covered the aftercare for this year's kids. Quietly. Again. Corin didn't respond right away. You okay with them calling you Hope Builder? Kai asked. No, Corin said. Then, after a beat, let the kids call me that, no one else. Fair enough. He hung up, stood in the window with a mug gone cold, and watched the streetlights blink on one by one. A building only lasted if someone checked its bones, and he was still checking. The streetlight across from Corin's window flickered once, then steadied. A warm amber pulse against the chill of night. He watched it for a moment longer. The faint hum of the city like a lullaby, only men who never stopped listening could hear. The mug in his hand had long gone cold, but he didn't move to refill it. Downstairs, somewhere in the bones of the building, a pipe was knocking. It wasn't urgent yet, but it would be. He noted the rhythm like a familiar song and made a mental note to fix it before it turned into something people noticed. Across the city, the gala team finalized their 10-year montage. Sable had made one non-negotiable edit. No titles, no gala gowns. Just a quiet frame near the end, a photo of a paper bracelet with glittered letters. Hope Builder. No one said who made it. No one needed to. When she watched the final cut, Sable whispered to herself, "This isn't about one man. It's about what he proved possible." The city was changing, not by decree, but by imitation. By the way, subscribe if you've ever built something that spoke louder than your name. Because this story isn't done. It's still echoing through places power forgot to look. The next morning, Corin stepped into the elevator shaft, not to fix it, but to train 2 new hires on rescue protocol. They listened with the stiff posture of men not used to being humbled. Until Corin showed them how the fault wasn't in the cables, but in the assumptions the engineer made. No machine fails suddenly, he said. It whispers first. The younger one, Nico, asked, "How do you always know where to look?" Corin adjusted the tension dial, glanced at the photo tucked behind his tools. You learn to hear what others don't. Upstairs, the building's regional director walked past the open shaft, paused, and doubled back. She watched Corin for a beat too long, then made a note on her phone. The Foundation's facilities whisper network had grown louder. He'd been requested to lead a district-wide safety overhaul. He would say no, but he'd say it in a way that created space for someone else to rise. That night, Sable hosted a small dinner for emergency response funders. No press, just decision makers. She passed around a slim folder, Corin's operational notes, anonymized, handwritten. The final page held a checklist titled, "If they're watching you." A hush followed. Then someone from a logistics firm said, "I don't know who wrote this, but it's better than any consultant I've hired." Sable smiled. That's the point. Corin didn't attend the dinner. He was home with Lena, helping her patch a loose strap on her backpack. She handled the needle with careful focus. "You're teaching me your toolbox," she said. "No," he corrected gently. "I'm teaching you your toolbox." She beamed. Later that week, a pipe burst 2 floors above the executive offices. The rush of water echoed like panic. Corin was already moving before the call came in. By the time the regional VP arrived with half a dozen clipboard consultants, the leak had been sealed, the water diverted, and the pressure recalibrated. One of the consultants pointed at Corin. "Who gave you authorization to bypass the main?" Corin didn't answer right away. He nodded toward the elderly tenant whose room had nearly flooded. "She did." The woman clutched a damp suitcase and gave the consultant a glare that could wither concrete. The VP cleared his throat. "We're reviewing protocols." Corin tilted his head. "You should also review your ceiling load calculations. That pipe was working harder than it was rated for." No one argued. By the next day, 3 other buildings across the network conducted preventative audits, quietly crediting the Delmer assessment model. The name wasn't Corin's idea. He didn't even know about it until a junior tech slipped and mentioned it during a boiler recalibration. He sighed, then let it go. Reputation, he'd learned, was a shadow that bent where it needed. Sable sent a message that night. "They've started rewriting contractor training based on your field patterns. You've probably trained more people now than you ever did in uniform." He replied, "Good. Keep it quiet. Let the work wear the badge." Lena fell asleep on the couch, one boot still on. Corin lifted her gently, her head resting against his shoulder. At the doorway, he paused. A letter had arrived from the city's Integrity Honors Committee. He didn't open it. He simply placed it beneath the photo and wristband, both of which now sat in a new frame, one Lena made from popsicle sticks and glue. Exposure had done its work. Now poetic justice moved like water, finding its level, reshaping old systems, and leaving behind something cleaner than it found. The letter from the city sat unopened for 3 days. Corin didn't ignore it. He just let it breathe. He'd seen what titles could do to people, the way they sharpened ego or softened spine. He hadn't spent years crawling out from under the weight of importance just to be dragged back in by stationery and seals. It remained beneath Lena's frame, quiet, patient, like everything else that mattered. On Thursday, the boiler hiccuped during a storm surge. Not failure, just warning. He caught it mid-shift, adjusted the regulators, and wrote a note for the overnight crew in his usual tight script. At the bottom, he added, "Don't wait for the alarms, listen for the rhythm." The young techs copied that line onto their boards without speaking. It wasn't policy, it was gospel. Upstairs, the corporate floors received the storm brief. Sable read it while on a call with Kai, her voice hushed. "They want to include him in the Civic Systems Summit next quarter," she said. "He won't go," Kai replied. "I know, but they should hear what he knows." "They are," he said. "They're just pretending they came up with it first." She smiled. He'd probably prefer that. Sable ended the call, then stared out the rain-drenched window. She remembered the way Corin had fixed the thermostat without asking for the room's temperature, how he'd just known. She'd spent her career buying expertise. But this was different. This was earned silence. By afternoon, the city's maintenance training division had adopted a full section titled Anonymous Case Study, Elevators, Ethics, and Exposure. Corin's phrases were quoted, his diagrams digitized, all without his name, exactly how he wanted it. Until one of the instructors, retired Army, quiet eyes, recognized the handwriting in the PDF. He didn't say anything out loud. He just shook his head and whispered, "You're still serving, aren't you?" Meanwhile, Lena came home with a school project titled Real Heroes. Her classmates had chosen astronauts, presidents, and athletes. She picked the janitor who carried a heart in his toolbox. Corin read it in his armchair, boots still on, eyes steady. She'd drawn the whole thing in pencil. No colors. "Because real heroes don't need bright stuff," she explained. He kissed the top of her head. "It's perfect." The next day, he replaced an old fuse box in the lower mechanical bay. Behind the panel, someone had scratched his name into the metal. He sighed, then added something below it. "Let the work speak. CD." It was the closest he'd come to a signature in years. Later that night, the regional director forwarded a file to Sable. It was a security cam snapshot, grainy, black and white, of Corin fixing the emergency flood barrier during the storm, alone, ankle deep in water, while the alert hadn't even reached the building app. "He was already there," the director wrote. "Before we even knew something needed fixing." Sable stared at the image for a long time. Then she pulled up the foundation's gala plan. At the very end, beneath the sponsor logos and donor tiers, she inserted a blank page. No name, no credits, just one line, built by the man who showed us where the floor begins. Back at the apartment, Lena asked why he never opened the city letter. "Aren't you curious?" she asked, arms crossed like she'd seen her teachers do. "I already know what it says," he replied. "How?" "Because people are starting to do better," he said, "and that only happens when truth finds oxygen." She didn't quite understand, but she hugged him anyway. That night, he opened the letter. Quietly, alone. Inside was a certificate, a commendation, and a personal note from the Commissioner of Civic Infrastructure. It praised his anonymous efforts, referenced testimonials, and requested permission to name a training fellowship after him. Corin placed the note behind the photo, in the frame. The certificate went in a drawer with his old credentials still sealed. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. Sable later received a simple envelope. No return address. Inside, one page, written in pencil. "Call it whatever you want. Just make sure it stays useful." That was all. The next gala event removed name tiers from the seating chart. All guests were randomized. Everyone sat eye level. And when someone laughed at a man in work boots during the appetizer course, the host paused the entire event and pointed to the chair he was sitting in. "That seat," the host said, "was funded by the man you just mocked, and thanks to him, 12 children breathe easier tonight." Silence fell. Sable watched it unfold without intervening. Justice didn't need her hand anymore. It had learned to walk on its own. The silence at the gala was longer than anyone expected, not uncomfortable, just complete. The man in boots didn't speak. He didn't need to. The host's words hung in the air, heavier than chandeliers. No one touched their wine. Corin wasn't there. Of course not. He was where he always was, beneath the noise, inside the walls, near the pulse of things that broke when no one paid attention. At that exact moment, he was adjusting a failing condensate pump in a low-rise off 7th Street. His gloves were soaked, his shoulders ached, and his mind was clear. He didn't know what had just happened at the gala, but he'd feel the ripple soon. The guest who'd mocked the boots had turned pale. She whispered an apology, not to the man, but to the room. Sable saw it all. She didn't interfere. That wasn't the point anymore. Let the room teach itself. The next morning, Corin arrived at the shop to find a folded note pinned to the staff corkboard. "Thanks for reminding us who really pays for the table. Someone watching." He took it down without a word and tucked it into the inside flap of his toolbox. Next to the drawing, next to the photo, next to the wristband. The archive was growing. not with recognition, but with reminders. A few days later, he was called to a private floor where a new executive's biometric scanner had failed. The woman in a tailored suit watched him warily as he pried open the wall panel. "You the one they keep whispering about?" she asked. He didn't look up. "People whisper when the truth walks past them." She folded her arms. "They said you used to handle budgets bigger than this building. I used to handle things I don't miss. Why are you still here then?" "Because people still breathe here." She said nothing after that. When the scanner lit green and the door slid open, she stepped through without saying thank you. Didn't matter. He wasn't there for gratitude. He was there for function. Sable sent him a message that night. Another child made it off the ventilator today. His mom asked who helped fund the surgery. We told her, "Someone who fixes things." She cried anyway. Corin stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then turned off the phone. Later, Lena padded into the kitchen in socked feet, her voice small. "Did I draw you right?" She held up a new picture. Him at the top of a staircase, fixing a light bulb. Everyone else was watching from below. At the bottom, she'd written, "He climbs alone, so we all see better." He smiled. "You forgot something." "What?" He handed her a brown crayon. "My boots." She giggled and started coloring them in, careful not to cross the lines. That week, the city posted the list of integrity honors publicly. Corin's name wasn't on it, but beneath the announcement was a line that no one expected. This year, a private citizen declined formal recognition. Instead, he requested we redirect the award funding toward apprenticeship programs in building safety and pediatric health logistics. The committee has honored his request. Sable saw it. Kai forwarded it. The staff at 3 buildings printed it out and taped it above their time clocks. No name, just impact, exactly as designed. Corin was walking the mechanical loop when a man in a clean suit stopped him by the freight exit. Looked like a developer. Wrong shoes for stairs. "Hey, you the one with the kid? The heart condition?" Corin tensed. "Why?" The man offered a small envelope. "My niece. Surgery's next month. Your donations made it possible. Thought you should know." Corin opened the envelope later. Inside was a photo of a toddler giving a thumbs up with an oxygen mask on, and a sticky note. "I'll walk when I wake up. That's what I told them. You helped me get there." He added it to the frame behind Lena's drawing. The next morning, Sable held a foundation press briefing and changed the closing line of her speech. "In this room," she said, "we sit at tables that were built long before we arrived. If you want to honor the builders, do it by building something worth standing on." No one asked who she meant. They all knew. Down in the sublevel, Corin finished patching a seal, stood up slow, and cracked his neck. Another silent save. Another system prevented from failing out loud. That was how he liked it. He brushed dust from his knee, packed his wrench, and left the boiler room warmer than he'd found it. Corin stepped out of the boiler room just as the hallway lights flickered back to full strength. The storm outside had tripped something on the city grid. Again, he'd routed backup power before the elevators so much as hiccuped. By the time the system caught up, his work was already done. Upstairs, no one noticed the save. That was the goal. The fewer people who saw him, the more they felt safe. His phone buzzed as he passed the freight bay. It was a message from Kai. "Tomorrow, Civic Center. They're presenting the scholarship. News outlets will be there. You sure you won't come?" Corin stared at it. He'd been sure before. Now, Something tugged, not for himself, for the ones watching, for the kids wearing paper bracelets. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he climbed the service stairwell, 3 floors up, where he'd stored the broken panel with Lena's drawing behind it. The elevator repair crew wanted to scrap it last month. He'd told them no, some things weren't trash. They were reminders. He stood there for a long minute, just breathing, thinking. Back at home, Lena worked on a school report titled How to Fix the World. Her teacher had told them to write about a job that makes life better. She didn't write doctor or engineer. She wrote, "My dad." Sable, on the other side of the city, stood before the Civic Center stage reviewing the event script. A staffer handed her a final update. "He's still not on the RSVP list." She nodded. "He wouldn't be." The staffer hesitated. "Should we remove the segment?" "No," she said. "Leave the chair empty. That's how he shows up." The next morning, Corin dressed like always. Canvas jacket, worn boots, toolbox in hand. But before he left, he looked at Lena's drawing again, at the phrase she'd written at the bottom. "He climbs alone so we all see better." He folded it, carefully, and slipped it into his inside coat pocket. Then quietly, he changed direction. He didn't tell anyone. Not Kai, not Sable, not even Lena. At the Civic Center, the ceremony was underway. Politicians gave practice speeches. Photographers lingered near the front. Then came the scholarship presentation. The Delmer Fellowship for Emergency Infrastructure and Pediatric Logistics. A long name for a simple idea. Build things that protect the most vulnerable. Sable took the stage. "This fellowship," she said, "was not funded by a corporation or shaped by a legacy donor. It was born from silence, from service, from a man who never asked to be seen." She paused. "Which is why," she added, "he may not be in this room." Murmurs passed through the crowd. Cameras swiveled toward the aisle. And that's when Corin walked in, boots damp from sidewalk puddles, collar turned down. No announcement, no spotlight, just presence. He didn't approach the stage. He didn't wave. He stood at the back, arms crossed, toolbox at his feet. Sable caught his eye. She didn't smile. She just nodded. Once, deeply. It was enough. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood, quietly, one by one, no noise, just respect. That was his standing ovation. Later, after the event ended, a student approached Corin outside the hall. Young, nervous, holding the scholarship letter. "You don't know me," the student said, "but I'm going to study systems engineering because of what you started." Corin looked at him, then at the folded letter in his hand. "Then don't start with systems," he said. "Start with people." The student nodded, like he'd been handed a map. That night, Lena met him at the door. "You went," she said, surprised. "I did." "Did they clap?" He shrugged. "They stood. That was louder." She grinned and handed him another drawing. This one of him at the back of a room full of people facing forward. At the bottom, she'd written, "Sometimes the builder doesn't sit at the table." He holds it up. He framed that one too. By morning, photos of the empty chair and Corin standing in the back circulated online. But no name was officially attached. No caption explained who he was, and somehow that made it matter more. The public started calling him the man with the toolbox. Sable received requests to license the story. She declined everyone. "Let them learn," she told Kai. "Let them earn it." Exposure had done its work. Poetic justice had landed. And the man they'd once laughed at, he was holding the city up from underneath. The morning after the Civic Center, Corin woke early. not from habit, but from quiet. The kind of quiet earned after a long storm. He moved through the apartment like a man carrying no weight, pouring coffee, tightening a loose knob on the cabinet Lena had helped fix last week. She'd drawn a tiny heart on the wood, tucked where no one could see unless they were the one repairing it. It made him smile. Lena was still asleep, curled into the side of the couch, blanket halfway kicked off. On the wall above her hung the newest drawing, the one with the empty chair and the man standing at the back. No name, just the weight of truth. Outside, the city breathed like it always had, but something felt different. More people were listening. He could feel it in the way elevators paused less, in how the boiler system in the north wing reported perfect rhythm for the 5th straight week, in how the young techs stopped asking if they were good enough and started acting like they were. The ripple hadn't stopped. It had simply gone underground, like pipes, like power, like him. Later that day, he passed the lobby and saw the little girl with the paper bracelet again. She pointed and whispered something to her father, who nodded but didn't approach. Corin caught the gesture. A nod, subtle, full of gratitude that didn't need words. He returned it. That evening, he met Kai at the corner diner. No press, just coffee and the kind of silence between men who'd seen both war and bureaucracy and still chose to build. Kai slid him a folder. They're offering again, keynote at the National Infrastructure Summit. Corin didn't even open it. No, Kai smirked. Figured. But then Corin added, send someone else, one of the apprentices. Kai blinked. You serious? They're the next floor. I was just foundation. Kai folded the folder, slower this time. You know, I thought you were wasting yourself when you took the maintenance job. Thought it was grief. It was, Corin said. But it was also clarity. He didn't elaborate. Kai didn't ask. Back home, Lena watched a video about city workers and pointed at the screen. They're doing your job wrong, she said. How can you tell? They're not listening first, Corin laughed. Deep, real. You've been paying attention, she grinned. You told me that's the secret, he nodded. It is. The following week, Sable visited a construction site her firm had recently funded. No hard hats were issued until the apprentices could explain where every exit was. The instructor didn't yell. He taught by asking questions until the answers built themselves. Corin's methods, codified but still invisible. Back at the building, the broken seal in the stairwell finally gave out. The alert system didn't catch it, but Corin did, before the pressure rose, before anything spilled. He replaced it with a newer model, stronger, built to last, then sat on the stair for a moment longer than usual. Lena had asked him last night if he was ever going to stop fixing things. He told her, not until I stop seeing what's broken. But what if everything's okay one day, she'd asked. He smiled. Then I'll just keep checking to be sure. Now in the quiet stairwell, he unfolded the drawing she'd made when she was 6. The one with his toolbox and the words, he listens for what breaks first. He added a date in the corner and retaped it to the inside of the lid. He didn't need more recognition. He had proof. When the building manager passed by later and mentioned the city was installing a plaque outside with his name, Corin gently shook his head. No name, he said, but let the plaque say this. Built quiet, held strong. The manager hesitated, then wrote it down. At the next gala, the tradition of randomized seating held, and beside each plate, was a folded card with no donor name, just the words. This seat was built by someone who stayed until it worked. People didn't ask who. They just sat a little straighter, a little humbler. Corin never saw it in person. That night, he took Lena to the park instead. She ran ahead to the swings while he sat on the bench he'd repaired last spring. No one knew, no plaque. But it didn't squeak anymore. It held, just like he always did. Now ask me for the next story title. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Single dad was rejected on a Christmas blind date until a woman whispered, "Will you be my husband?" Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?